Welcome to Wandering Jews at J Squared Adventures. Travel far enough and you meet yourself.
We're your hosts. I'm Scott.
I'm Sorrel.
From the minute you get off the bus on Agrippa Street, the market, Mahane Yehuda, it's there. The noise and the smells and the colors. Mahane Yehuda, Jerusalem's open-air market, it just seems to be charged with this unmistakable energy. You know, it's unlike almost any other corner in the city of Jerusalem, and people who know Jerusalem know it's not exactly a calm city. Maybe part of the electric charge that we get from the market, maybe we've grown accustomed to a kind of antiseptic consumer experience. We're online shopping, we're in the big box stores. Mahane Yehuda is a totally different animal. It's like taking a very calm house pet, and then all of a sudden you meet a lion in the middle of the jungle. It's a totally different animal. I mean, Sorrel, when you go to the market, what do you like? What do you look for? Where do you feel that electric charge of a different experience?
So it's funny, Scott, because you were just talking about Mahane Yehuda being anything but antiseptic, right? And the colors and the smells, the aromatic, that's what comes to mind. Everything from the spices to the dried fruit. We always stop off first. We like to go on Friday morning, which almost seems like a masochistic act, because to go on an Erev Shabbat when you're literally guaranteed of not being able to see the ground in front of you because it's bustling with so many people. But that energy, and we head straight for the dried fruits in all the colors. And then, of course, there's the Marzipan Bakery, which is just iconic. It's legendary. If we tell people, we live in Rehovot, but if we tell people we're going to be in Jerusalem, they're like, are you going to be near Marzipan Bakery? It's just like that is the association. It goes hand in hand with Mahane Yehuda, that energy. So yes, it's a little bit like walking into the jungle, and it's a whole other animal. But we love it.
Yeah,
what about you,
definitely.
Scott?
It's funny because I think Friday morning, we also, Ronit and I like to go very early, like 7:38, just as the coffee shops are beginning to open.
Nice.
And literally, while it's still quiet and people are setting up, have some coffee, have something sweet, do a little bit of people watching. And we're like those shoppers who, like, if it takes more than 20 minutes, forget it. So Mahane Yehuda, it's like the quick list. Usually that quick list on a Friday is challah for Shabbat, and then something sweet. Because during the week, we tend not to have that kind of stuff in the house. But, you know, Shabbat, Oneg Shabbat, the idea of the joy of Shabbat. So bring something sweet that's been freshly baked, apropos smells, and just that beautiful look of a rogalach, of a chocolate cake with the sides covered in that dripping chocolate. And then bring that home, especially to share with guests at night, is, definitely a good Mahane Yehuda experience.
You're a smart Mahane Yehuda participant, like, because you're going when it's early in the morning, you're able to people watch before it gets too crowded. So you're strategic about your Mahane Yehuda visits.
Very strategic. And before anyone gets very upset with us, I must have to say that, we use the term antiseptic. I would hate to suggest that Mahane Yehuda is anything but clean. It is definitely clean. But when I say antiseptic, I mean that sense of shopping that's so depersonalized, that we're so distant from the person we're buying from, that there's really no human encounter or interaction.
Oh, there's no distance.
Welcome to Israel. And that sense of there's no distance, I think, is part of the fun of Mahane Yehuda and other local markets all around the country. That sense of, hey, you see the people, you're part of the scene. And it's not just the push of a button that we've grown so used to, especially in recent years.
And also the encounters. It's not just the physical distance, one human next to another. It's also that you could be buying your marzipan rogalach, or you could be buying your beautiful fruits and vegetables and engage in all sorts of conversations with people you met 30 seconds ago.
Definitely. Let's take a step back for a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about the market, also in terms of kind of where it came from and how it grew.
Yes.
Because again, the market itself is very much part of the history of the new city of Jerusalem.
Correct.
And in that second half of the 19th century, as new neighborhoods were established outside of the old city walls, and they were spreading from the area of Jaffa Gate up to Mishkanot Shananim, up to Yamin Moshe, along Jaffa Road, these new neighborhoods were set up actually along the traditional historic trade route that led from Jerusalem, the old city, towards the city of Yaffo and the port. And so Mahane Yehuda was established along that route of the new neighborhoods. 1897, a group of famous Sephardi families from really the elite of Jerusalem, the Navones and the Valeros, and they were among the pioneering entrepreneurs who purchased the land, established those early shops and stalls, and worked to expand the market.
That's also why it's called Mahane Yehuda, right? It's referring to Yehuda Navon.
Exactly,
right.
exactly. And so many of these new neighborhoods that grew up were named after either members of the local Jerusalem elite or members of the Jewish international elite. People are familiar with Mishkanot Shananim and Yamin Moshe that we mentioned, and the windmill, which of course is named after Moses Montefiore, one could say one of the inventors of modern Jewish philanthropy. Now, with the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the beginnings of the British Mandate, 1917, the end of the First World War, the British added their touch to Jerusalem
as they
and
like to do.
to Mahane Yehuda, as they like to do. And the laying out of streets and the covering of the market, protecting people from the summer sun and the winter rains, the renovations in the 1920s, that was essentially Mahane Yehuda. That's the Mahane Yehuda I remember when I first came to Israel in the 1980s. And really that was how the market looked until the more recent modernization that Mahane Yehuda underwent at the very beginning of the 21st century.
But in the 1980s and 1990s, when we were dating ourselves, but when I would go as a child, as a teenager to Israel and visit Mahane Yehuda, that was essentially, from what you're saying, that's essentially post the British facelift.
That's post the British facelift, right?
Right. So
I was not around to see the British facelift in the 1920s.
And, you know, when we look at Mahane Yehuda as a microcosm, right, of the Jerusalem mosaic, and the ongoing question since the end of the 1967 Six-Day War about Jerusalem, is it a city united or is it divided? As you walk through Mahane Yehuda, as you walk through the market, right, and you're listening to all the different languages, from Hebrew to Arabic, Yiddish, Russian, French, English, and people from all different types of demographics. It could be a young woman standing between the lottery ticket stand and the falafel window on the corner of Agrippa's, playing a guitar, to a chassid wearing a large white kippah, buying a bag of chalot for Friday night, to a Palestinian Arab who's calling out to customers about special deals of the day on the different kinds of tomatoes offered at the stand. Food coming from all over the world because the Jews returned to the lands of Israel after 2,000 years. You're walking through the market and you are getting this sense of history and Jews coming, and not just Jews, Christians, Arabs, coming from all corners of the world and reflecting, as we're looking at the different stands, the different pieces that make up that mosaic.
For sure. And even when we think about the different kinds of foods, I mean, there are kind of the normal go-tos. I mean, my nephews, when they come to visit Israel, so, you know, they eat their weight in shawarma. The three of them are all football players, so you can imagine how much shawarma that actually is.
Do they have a favorite?
I mean, basically, for them, it's wherever they can grab the most kosher meat.
Uh-huh.
But I want to suggest to people, you know, go for the thing which you haven't tried yet, beyond shawarma and falafel. So if you're into breakfast, check out, you'll see in the market, it's a piece of bread. It's a piece of pastry. It's the size of two hands. It looks a little bit like a sailing ship. And sitting in the middle of the boat is a beautiful fried egg. That's Georgian.
Kashapuri.
Exactly. And although it's become very much part of also the modern Israeli kitchen, might not be so familiar to a lot of people who are traveling with us. If you're going for lunch, so make sure you check out schug. It's a traditional Yemenite hot sauce.
Too spicy for me.
It depends because you have red and you have green. And basically it's a kind of Yemenite salsa verde, chili peppers, cilantro, cumin, garlic, olive oil. And today in almost any restaurant in Mahane Yehuda, whether it's Yemenite or Iraqi or some version of Ashkenazi, of European Jewry, you're likely to find salt, pepper, and a small bowl of schug. If it's not on the table, ask for it. For dinner, if you're a serious hardcore carnivore, go for the Jerusalem mixed grill. Spleens, lungs, hearts, livers.
Not for the faint-hearted.
Not for the faint-hearted. I hope that was a well-intentioned
pun intended.
Pun. Grilled onions and spices. Most folk foods all around the world, most popular national dishes, they grew out of what people could afford when they couldn't afford anything. And mixed grill, it was simply the collection of what was left over in the butchers in Mahane Yehuda after the more expensive fowl and beef was sold to affluent families for Shabbat. And all the leftovers, all the parts, purchased by working class folks and becoming a Jerusalem favorite.
How often do we think about that? Like when you're talking about going to the Jerusalem mixed grill, you're sitting there, you're enjoying your big plate of all the different kinds of meats. But when you put it in that context, you come away with a completely different perspective.
Definitely, because the food we eat has a history. It comes from a social context.
Yes.
It comes from a class context.
Yes.
It comes from an ethnic context. Take dessert. Because if we mention breakfast and we mention lunch and we mention
equal
dinner.
Opportunity, Scott.
Equal opportunity. I don't want to leave anyone out. Something sweet. Malabi. Milk, cream, cornstarch, a little bit of rose water, a little bit of almonds sprinkled or pistachios on top.
It's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste. However, it goes back because it was traditionally served by Turkish Jewry and North African Jewry after the Yom Kippur fast.
Really?
It was an offering at Turkish Jewish weddings to symbolize the couple's sweet life that hopefully was ahead of them. During Shavuot, right, the spring holiday traditionally associated with the giving of the Torah, Malabi is still served in many Sephardic homes. Jews coming from Spanish, Portuguese backgrounds who then spread out to the rest of the world following the expulsion of 1492. Because Malabi, that sweet milk base, Shavuot was called traditionally by Sfaradim as the festival of roses.
Well, given all of that context, I must give a shout out to the fish and chips in Mahane Yehuda. If we're really representing everyone in every course of the meal, got to give a shout out to classic fish and chips that can also be found in Mahane Yehuda. The British flag waving strong.
New traditions. We'll have to wait for the time when haggis is served in Mahane Yehuda, but we might see the coming of the Messiah before we see haggis arriving in Mahane Yehuda.
So we're talking about the evolution of Mahane Yehuda and how it's seen changes. And if we look at Mahane Yehuda's cobblestone streets and historic stalls, they seem timeless. Yet the market, as we've begun to uncover, is constantly reinventing itself. And it serves both as a stage, like you will see very often in stalls, like pictures of political figures and politicians will come and it will be a venue for people to engage in political campaigning. And it's also, you were talking about the social construct, Scott, it's also a microcosm of gentrification, because while it was once a no-frills market, catering, talking about apropos mixed grill, catering to Jerusalem's working class, Mahane Yehuda is now a hotspot for trendy bars at night. When the shutters are closed, Mahane Yehuda comes alive and becomes this hotspot for trendy bars, boutique shops, upscale restaurants. So what was once a place to haggle over fresh produce and spices, at night becomes a destination for fusion cuisine and craft cocktails.
Yeah, in that sense, what's happened in Mahane Yehuda, it's very similar to what's happened in other major cities around the world.
Sure.
San Miguel Market in Madrid, Faneuil Hall in Boston, the meat market area in Manhattan, all these places that they were functioning industrial zones, both wholesale and retail markets, slowly but surely gentrified, built up, something gained, and also maybe something lost.
Sign of the times.
I mean, in Mahane Yehuda, I think there is this sense also of the different groups of people, and we mentioned some of the different ethnic groups also through the food. But I think there's also sometimes a sense of the generational divide.
Yes.
Jerusalem has become a city with many shopping malls, and I think I read recently that per capita, per the size of our population, we actually have more mall space in Israel than almost any other Western country.
Really?
So Mahane Yehuda has become a place for people who aren't going to malls. And so you do see, I think, in Mahane Yehuda, a lot of the Jerusalem working class. You do see a lot of older folks. You do see a lot of the populations who live in the neighborhoods immediately around the market which also includes both Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jerusalemites.
Mm-hmm.
And that's during the day. At night, it's almost like you drop the curtains and a new show comes on.
Yeah.
And that show might include at night people going to the coffee shops, to the pubs, to the upscale restaurants, to the music venues.
The two faces of Mahane Yehuda.
For sure. And maybe there's also a third, because at night, unfortunately, Jerusalem today is Israel's poorest city. Yeah. And at nighttime, you can also see people who are coming from nearby neighborhoods who they don't have the money to spend even on fruit and veg.
Correct.
And people looking for the leftover tomatoes and cucumbers and apples that have been left over from the day's shopping after the stalls and shops have been closed up. And this is also part of the scene, part of the faces that make up the market and part of the reality of Jerusalem today.
And as the shutters close also, you have the graffiti, which, poses a question as well. If we're looking at the graffiti as the shutters are closed and, you could see it as a depiction of history and a comment on culture, are we seeing it as a celebration of modern artistry, or is it part of what you were describing, Scott, which is that changing Jerusalem, a reflection of that change? And I think there is that tension. And I think that, you have the daytime face and you have the nighttime face and all the people who meet in between. And it's a representation of that ongoing, evolving reality.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the graffiti thing is a good example, because we still might have places around Mahane Yehuda where it's graffiti in the sense of pirate art done illicitly or illegally without asking permission.
Yes.
Today, what we're seeing is a lot more public art. And so it's art that is on walls and on sidewalks and etc. But it's art that is hired. It's paid for by the local committee of the shop owners in Mahane Yehuda.
Right.
It's paid for by the city of Jerusalem.
Right.
So is it great to see? Does it bring color to the market? Yes. But what's the difference between an art that is hired, paid for, given permission, and an art that's a little bit wilder, a little bit crazier, that's done off the cuff in the middle of the night? It's two different kinds of expressions, and definitely both have validity.
And we're beholding both realities. So when you go to Mahane Yehuda today, whether you be, a resident, whether you be a tourist, somebody visiting Israel, you can ask yourself as you're walking through Mahane Yehuda, what draws your attention? And notice the vendors, notice the people that you're interacting with, notice the time as the sun is setting and you see that kind of changing of the guards and, people getting deals at the very last minute from bakeries because everything that's left over is on sale. And then you see the lights and the cocktails and everything emerge. Ask yourself, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What are you drawn to? And to hold those two together.
For sure. I mean, ultimately, I would say Mahane Yehuda is a good place to practice something which is good, not just in Israel, but anywhere that you're traveling to. Engage.
Oh, not haggling?
Practice getting out there. Haggling is a kind of engagement.
Yes.
Yeah, so Mahane Yehuda, it's a great place to practice that engagement, speaking with people, encountering with people, daring to step up and, hi, how are you? And make yourself known and listen to somebody else. It's a good thing to do in Mahane Yehuda. It's a good thing to do in travel in general. And it's also a nice thing to take home, especially these days where sometimes we don't even know the name of the neighbor who actually lives right next door or down the hall from us.
And you can even tap into that consumer piece of the food and the fresh figs, or even sipping a craft cocktail and use that as a starting point to not only pause and consider the lives, but use that as a way of engaging and talking to people about their customs, their favorites, and their story, their version of Mahane Yehuda.
And now, something for the road. A tip, a recommendation to help you make every journey your own.
Hey, I'm Rabbi Chana Estrin, and I'm an Israel Torah educator. And these are my thoughts for the road. Regarding Mahane Yehuda, as you heard, it is a place where people and ethnicities and different classes and food types, everything comes together in this one beautiful, vibrant location. And there's something that I love to do, both as a resident of Jerusalem. I go and I hang out in Mahane Yehuda. I do my shopping, carry my bags home. But also when I'm there with groups of tourists, or as I prefer to call them, pilgrims, I try to get people to go and do more than just check this off. And I think this goes for anywhere that we travel in the world. It's not just a tourist site. This is a living, vibrant place. And my favorite activity to do in Mahane Yehuda is I actually go down to Roasters, a local coffee place with really, really good coffee. But I just sit there and they have a bar and I can sit and I can people watch and see the life going by and who's buying what, the local vendors, have a conversation with the person sitting next to me, and just really take in the life that's happening around. And the more that I can have a conversation about that, even better. But to allow myself the time to really transfer from being a tourist who's just here to check things off to being that pilgrim, that person that is looking to be changed by what's happening around me, by what I'm experiencing, the history and the love that is kind of surrounding me. Or if you happen to be there on a Friday, the hustle and bustle of people pushing through so they can get their food and get home for Shabbat. But I think my note for the road, my thought for the road, wherever we are traveling, is really to stop and have that cup of coffee or that bagel or whatever it is that's local to the place that you're at, and just take in the atmosphere and meet the people around you and take that home with you as it embeds itself in the person that we are going forward into life. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening. Dive deeper into the world of travel on our J Squared Adventures website. That's j2adventures.com. And stay in the loop with our latest adventures on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all under J2 Adventures. And if you enjoyed hanging out with us, don't forget to leave us a comment, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, travel safely and keep wondering. I'm Sorrel.
I'm Scott.
See you soon with the Wandering Jews.